All right, guys. Afternoon. I want to talk to you about characterization in the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. The reason I'm doing it through voice recording and video is so that when you go to do the assessment task, you'll have this with you and you can expand on it. Also, we've got the other class as well. So the assessment task is going to come out pretty soon. Purpose of this presentation is one, I'm going to talk about the impact of the protagonist, Chris, and what he has on the story, the role of the minor characters, the reflection of the mother, and the audience's identification with the father. Considering this is a close study of text, this is your role with this. So I'm going to have this presentation in the activities column for you to work on. One, I want you to take notes on what I have to say, and if you can develop it even further, that's awesome. And two, I want you to find quotes to support your points. Considering it's close study of text, the more evidence you have, the better you're going to go. And then I've constructed some pill paragraphs that ask you to respond to each of those 4 areas. So let's jump into it. So some of the stuff we've already known, but we're going to talk about it a bit further. So this is told in a first-person narration. So Chris tells us the story through his eyes. That allows us as the reader to get to know his world rather than he trying to fit into the reader's world. For Chris, he has a logical way of understanding the world, even though his logic sometimes is different to our understanding of logic, and he's emotionally detached from the world. So the things that take place in there that we can understand on a deeper level, he's not able to. The story starts off with Chris writing it. Now remember, it's told in past and present tense. So the actions take place, and then the writing process is Christopher coming to an understanding of it. A lot of it he's just literally narrating, but over time he gets a deeper understanding of the situation and who he is himself. It's a murder mystery, so it starts off with the death of Wellington, but as Christopher goes into it, he tries to solve the problem, but once he does solve who murders Wellington, he himself ventures into mysteries in his own world, and we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of structure. For the reader, it's a postmodern text. So Christopher's telling the story, but we need to infer understanding on what's going on. So there's a lot of dramatic irony in here in terms of you have a deeper understanding of the text itself. Now, dramatic irony is usually when the reader knows more than what a character does. Usually they've seen another scene in a third-person text where there are different characters giving information. In this case, you are inferring the situation. So you're taking what Christopher's written, and then you put deeper understanding to it. So you have a broader understanding of what Christopher does. So the character arc. Character arc usually means how a character evolves over the course of a text. So a protagonist should never be the same as they are at the end of the text as the beginning. If you remember back to year 9, you did the hero's journey, and it follows that cycle. Christopher himself, though, he doesn't significantly develop mentally as a character. So if you look at Christopher at the end of the book, he's still thinking logically. He still has basic understanding of things. He gains trust back from his father when he gets a dog, rather than having a true understanding that the father tried his best to look after him, etc. However, Christopher does change due to his growth in confidence and his ability to interact and achieve in the wider world. If you think by the end of the novel, he's ready to go to university, he's ready to do his A-levels, he's ready, and one of the final sentences is, if I can catch a train on my own, I can do anything. So it's that maturity and confidence that changes rather than him as a character himself. So for that, your question for the PL is, how does the first-person narration shape the narrative in a way that a third-person narration could not? I got to fix up my spelling. I did that quickly. So you're looking at the idea of how do we see the world through Christopher's eyes? How does that make it a stronger novel than it would be if we were looking at the world through our eyes and fitting Christopher into it? The minor characters. At the beginning of the novel, it's easy to assume that Christopher is new to this area. The fact that he does know his neighbours, but he doesn't know them very well. So he addresses them as Mrs. Shears, Mrs. Wise, Mr. Thompson, etc. And particularly comes obvious when he goes outside to speak to them after Wellington's death. However, in reality, Christopher's lived in that house all of his life, and so have those around him. So the fact later on when the reader learns that Mrs. Shears and his father have had a relationship, and Mrs. Shears actually spent lots of time in his house, particularly after the supposed death of his mother, you would imagine there'd be a close connection between Christopher and Mrs. Shears. But the fact that when the dog's dead, she comes out to him and speaks to him as if he's a stranger as well, shows us that there's a lack of connection, and really that's because Chris is detached. He's unable to connect with people around him. So straight away that shows that Christopher's lack of emotional connection to elements of comfort. Where we'd expect someone to feel comfortable, Chris is still detached from it. Other minor characters help in the plot development, so push things forward. So Mrs. Alexander, for example, she's the lady that meets Chris at the lolly shop. She takes him for a walk and explains to him the true situation behind his mother, that his mother had an affair. Christopher doesn't find out that his mother was still alive at that point, but he does understand the fact that she wasn't the person that he thought her out to be. This draws out conflict between what Christopher should know and what he can process. So the other characters outside of the family are expecting Christopher to act the way someone his age would, and he's roughly 15, 16, so that they'd be aware of what's happening in the family situation at that level. And then finally, the minor characters act as a role model for development and learning. So if you think of Siobhan, it's never made clear whether Siobhan is just a teacher at the school or whether she's his counselor or psychologist, but it's her idea for him to write the story. It's her idea to continue it on, even particularly once she finds out his mother's alive, etc. Christopher often mentions it's his discussions with Siobhan that allow him to develop an understanding of learning from the situation. Well, that's at least what she's trying to do in Intro. So Siobhan highlights meta-language of Christopher learning through his writing. So what meta-language is language talking about language. So they talk about the thought process, what happened, how we should feel, etc. Siobhan discusses emotions a lot. Christopher does take the conversation on board, but doesn't process the emotions himself. So it leads us to the Peel paragraph. Explain how minor characters express the expectation that society would have on someone Christopher's age, and highlight how Christopher does or does not live up to these expectations. I did this quickly, so I'll fix up the spelling errors when we finish, or part of editing. Then we move on to the two other main characters, the mother and the father. The mother herself is a very interesting character in the way that she goes about things. And so first of all, the audience is able to understand her misgivings, but Christopher is not able to understand it. This means when we do find out that the mother is still alive, we find out that she had an affair and she's moved out, the audience does look unfavorable on the father for not telling, but can come up with an understanding for why. So she's given up the situation, she's put in the too hard basket, and she's moved on. Christopher, however, doesn't take any of that in when he finds out his mother's alive. And I guess just like any child, it's a great thing to know that your mother's still there. Then the way the novelists have been structured, their communication actually suits Christopher. So he learns about his mother through letter format interactions. If you think of a letter is a detached piece of information. There's a time transparency between letters, and also there's a physical transparency, or distance, I should say, rather than transparency. So when Christopher's holding the letter, there's no other human being there. He's able to detach himself emotionally and actually just explore the ideas. So what the mother says in the letters, though, are very interesting. The mother only gives reasons for leaving based on Christopher's behaviour. And so she particularly talks about the time she had to take him to the shops at Christmas, and Christopher lay down on the floor kicking and screaming because someone bumped into him, I think it was, and she had to get the taxi to take him back home. Her second point of information in the letters is the idea of the issues concerning her new life. So a new job, new friends she's making, etc. And she speaks in a way that she thinks Christopher should be proud of her for doing this new stage in life. That's actually a pretty immature way of thinking. The fact that she's left her son on his own, a son that's struggling, and she's expecting him to feel good for her. So if anything, the parent and child role has changed a little bit if they're the other way around. Christopher, though, on learning that his mother's still alive, instantly wants to go and find her. Now, this need is expressed through logic rather than emotional or maternal instincts. So Christopher finds the letters, instantly realizes that his father's lied to him, concept of broken of trust. As soon as the trust is broken with Christopher and the father, Christopher initially thinks that he has to go. I might stop it there and come back to it because I'm going to be stopped in 20 seconds.